Hi, welcome back to Mountain Gem Card Collectibles. So I'm sure you've heard about the big news, about this massive behemoth known as PSA acquiring Beckett. So everyone's fearful about this big monopoly just stomping all over the little guy as usual. That's what monopolies do. And I know there's a lot of publications, gurus trying to sell the fact that Beckett's going to remain independent. Even PSA is selling us this big line of BS, and we'll see how long that lasts. But we all know how SGC has ended up after the PSA takeover. They're just a skeleton crew for the most part. They've fallen off, even your typical monthly grading population pages for the top four, So it's really shameful to an extent, but I believe what all these buyouts are pointing to is something that people aren't really talking about, and that's the fact that I believe a lot of these grading companies were possibly deep in debt. And why would that be? Well, maybe, grading isn't as profitable as people believe it is. And you also have to think about the fact that, we just went through a big, fad with sports cards, TCG, even like Funkos, whatever, for grading. And I've definitely noticed my sales have kind of fallen off a cliff to an extent since those days. And I'm sure a lot of other people in this hobby have noticed it as well. The hobby interest is there, but it doesn't feel as strong overall as it did a few years ago. And a lot of us wish it was, I'm guilty too. I wish that there was as much interest in sports cards as there was, say, in 2021, 2022, even in the 2023. And basically, towards the end of 2023, I've noticed, my sales have more or less been decreasing. And hopefully, that changes, for my sports cards. But I've said it before, I'm an artist. I've had stuff in local galleries. I'm pushing my business more into my art side, so I'll be doing art shows, because there's a lot more art shows up here where I live in Montana than, say, card shows. But anyway, to me, that's one of the unspoken issues with the monopolization of grading companies is the fads kind of died off. And I believe a lot of these bigger companies are kind of pulling the parachute cord for one reason or another. And I believe it's kind of an unspoken detail of, what's the debt ratio that, say, Beckett would have or SGC. We don't know. And if a company's in a lot of debt and someone buys them out, yeah, I'd be the same way. I'd be like, I'm selling out too. I won't have all this debt hanging over my head, And we see that with, like iRobot, with that purchase. They still owe a lot of money to the company that purchased them, which is strangely enough. We see a lot of companies going bankrupt lately. A lot of buyouts, this buyout of HBO Max, we have like Netflix and Paramount fighting over it. I'm not exactly sure, who's going to win that battle. But it does get exhausting, being a consumer, having to, sit back and watch these titans, battle it out constantly. And you ask yourself, what are we going to be left with? So, this is just kind of an article from Clicked here. This came out. I know Neo was on this. I saw Neo's video. I mean, he was like, NBC News, ABC News, breaking news, CNN, whatever, Fox News. He was on it, and it was coming out elsewhere as well. So he really broke it, I know, for the hobby more or less. But like it says here, PSA parent company collectors acquires Beckett. And, if you are a fan of monopolization, maybe you're rooting this on, but we'll get into the X comments. And what I've noticed about the X comments is most people are down about this. They're not happy, and I'm not happy about this either. We deserve more diversity in the grading market. And now we're having to rely on, startups, I guess, to bring that diversity because, we have a few, kind of third-party graders as I think of. I think of TAG as a third-party grader. I mean, I don't know how else to think of them, CGC, I even kind of think of CGC as a third-party grader. I mean, it's like you're sending your cards to a company that's known for grading comics, Anyway, it says here, PSA parent company collectors reached an agreement to acquire grading competitor Beckett, the company announced Monday. Okay. The first card I ever submitted for grading was to Beckett, and I consider collectors custodians of this important icon in the hobby. We believe that strong, well-supported brands help grow access to the hobby. And that comes from our good buddy Nat Turner, who I keep wishing would step down, especially with this big scandal that came out about, basically buybacks at PSA, and then the grade change, And so to me, this is just another way to kind of, cover that up. Like it says here, Collectivist Holdings was announced as the new parent company for Beckett in December 2024. And we just see this constant change. Beckett's acquisition is the second time Collectors has acquired a major trading card grading competitor. Collectors acquired SGC in February 2024 and has since been the process of transitioning the company into a boutique grading brand. That's funny. They've just more or less destroyed it. But anyway, it is what it is. And we have to kind of keep living in this realm of big monopolies. Now, I live in Montana, so I know all about monopolies, the history of monopolies, and what, our country deals with from these monopolies. We have a lot of Superfund sites in Montana full of pollution that the government just kind of sweeps under the rug. They don't want to deal with it. But the big monopoly in Montana was the Anaconda company. And it's interesting because really you never would have thought the Anaconda company, with its massive monopolization of the copper market, would have ever failed, This is just a Google Gemini AI overview. And I pretty much know this story myself, The Anaconda company didn't have one single bankruptcy but faced a series of financial crises, leading to its massive operations in Montana closing in the early 1980s, primarily after being bought by Arco, the Atlantic Richfield Company, in 1977. Due to plummeting copper prices, high costs, foreign nationalization, and environmental compliance issues, culminating in the closure of its major smelter in Anaconda and refinery in Great Falls, devastating local economies and creating Superfund sites. And Montana is still dealing with the loss of the Anaconda company. It really is. I mean, it put a lot of food on the table for a lot of workers in this state. And I've met a few of those old workers. I've been, to various Anaconda company grounds that are spread throughout the state. And like it says, it's been devastating since this monopoly shut down. And what shut it down? Now, this is something to consider. What shut down this massive monopoly? That was a lot bigger, say, than we're talking about sports card monopolies here. No, this was a massive mining, copper operation spread throughout numerous states in the USA, spread throughout South America. They made a lot of money. But this is what killed it off. Chilean nationalization, 1971. Chile took over Anaconda's major mines, significantly impacting its profits. Okay, so I don't see anything like that happening, in grading. Okay. Financial strain. Falling copper prices and high operating costs led to financial difficulties, forcing liquidation of other assets like timberlands. Yeah, and they were also involved in, lumber as well. And then, the Arco acquisition, they bought Anaconda intending to integrate it, but ultimately shifting focus. Arco bought out, Anaconda for the most part. That's kind of a red flag for sports cards. Falling copper prices. Okay. Now, they do have this monopoly, and a lot of people are going to start going elsewhere, because of this monopoly that they have. They keep saying that Beckett's going to be independent, all right? And that may last for a while, but eventually, it will probably just become a skeleton crew like SGC, And that takes us to X, and let's see how people are feeling about X, and this massive monopoly that consumers can't get away from. I mean, and apparently the DOJ is not going to get involved, like the DOJ wants to get involved with this Netflix, purchase of HBO Max, obviously, for political reasons, for one reason or another. And they're just kind of letting this thing go, which to me is really a failure of our current government. Because let's face it, if the government cares about consumers, they're going to, basically put their finger in the pie of every, massive consolidation or, basically PSA acquiring Beckett. But they're just letting it go, Like it says here, Collectibles Guru, breaking news. This came out 16 hours ago. Collectors Holdings, PSA's parent company, has agreed to acquire Beckett. They will keep it as an independent brand. Yeah, everyone just kind of laughs. Yeah, independent, whatever. If it was independent, it never would have been bought out. Okay. So let's go through some of these comments, and I'll try to pull some of the ones that are better. Just effing ridiculous. Top grader buys 2 of the top 3. I don't expect DOJ to get involved over Pokemon and baseball cards, but this is ludicrous. Yeah. To me, the DOJ needs to get involved. And if, our government really did care about consumers, which I know they don't, this thing would be put on the back burners for a while, but it's clearly not. Tens are going to become impossible unless you are in the chosen group. Yeah, I feel the same way. I've always looked at PSA as you can't just have a nice card. You have to be special. You have to be a favorite, kind of like, Topps Fanatics, Michael Rubin and his Breakers, If you're not one of those favorite groups, they're always going to just kind of, play games with you. Bad news for the hobby. We don't need a monopoly. Yeah, I mean, everything's getting monopolized. I think it's because the fad's dying out, personally. And you're seeing companies pull the parachute cord when they're given an opportunity, especially, in my opinion, due to likely their debt ratios, which we can't seem to see. All we're getting is monopolies. You see how Bally Fanatics and Topps overprint the runs this year. Junk Wax 2.0, yeah? That's just it. It's getting exhausting. And you have to ask yourself, will this monopolization of grading push even more people out of this market? And they'll go elsewhere into different hobbies or do different things, I mean, just like me, I went to school for auto body. I went for 2 years. I got my degree. I spent a lot of time looking at cars, and trying to purchase vehicles. I see a lot more opportunities there for what I like to do, for making a profit. I don't have to deal with monopolies for the most part. It tends to put a bigger smile on my face when it works out than fighting this battle with Topps Fanatics and PSA. I'm just putting that out there. And other people are going to kind of start saying the same thing. And it's just like, I guess I'm just happier doing this than fighting this battle of the monopolies, Okay. Very bad news. No more independence. Was once a oligopoly, now a monopoly. Where's the SEC? That's just it. Everyone's crying this. Where is the government? The card collectors and dealers stay rich. It's not really a kid's hobby and has not been for a long time. Yeah, it's an over-monopolized Anaconda. I'm just going to call it what it is. It's like the Anaconda company. with the way it's spread out through the country now. Beckett, SGC, PSA, they have their hands in the pie for buying up, cards and selling them on eBay and all this and that. It is ugly. Bro, F that. Prices for BGS grading about to go wild. Yeah, I'm sure the prices are going to skyrocket on grading overall. And that's just the nature of monopolies. I deal with that here in in Montana. I almost call Montana monopoly way. Well, I'm dealing with the electric company monopoly now, and they want to keep raising the rates on us. They keep buying everything out, and then what they do is they buy something out, and rather than them paying for it, they expect the consumer to pay for it. And I am just so exhausted. Grading just feels so fishy as more time goes on. Yeah, I mean, it's ugly. I'm not even sure how we can call it grading when the whole thing's been monopolized. I mean, it's just, maybe you should call it rating? I don't know. And in unrelated news, each company is now increasing prices due to market inflation. They'll probably wait a few weeks so it's not obvious, but it's coming. Each week there's a new reason to depart this hobby. I wouldn't be shocked if the next MLB CBA increases prices for players' autos and Topps cranks the prices even more. Yeah. I mean, we're just getting beat up on so many ends, from trying to acquire the cards to trying to get the cards graded, and it's just, you're going from fire to flame, I mean, I don't know what to say. Cool, so their standards will be awful as well. Can't wait to send stuff to them to have it destroyed too. Yeah, I mean, and there's so many stories about, people sending stuff to PSA and the stuff gets damaged. That's why I'm not rushing my best of the best products to PSA at this point. If I was a tech genius, I would create 100% AI grading company where there is zero human element. I don't know about AI. I've played around with AI. I'm kind of getting burned out of the AI fad, to be honest. If anything, they want to keep, building these kind of data centers for AI, and they keep raising people's electricity rates. I don't think AI is going to be the answer to grading. And if you really want to say AI is the answer to grading, I mean, we may as well just replace humans everywhere. You know what I mean? I just don't agree with AI. Sports card collectors are basically forced to go with PSA and its siblings. The two remaining big companies, CGC and TAG, are big because of Pokemon. SGC, Beckett, and PSA were the sports card companies. I guess I could see collectors grudgingly go towards TAG as an option. I don't know. I just... I don't know what it is about TAG. I'm not rushing to TAG either. I've been using CGC. I like them. And I might just go to CGC over TAG, even though I kind of look at them as a third-party grader for cards, because their big thing is comics, but it is what it is. That's what I'm going to do. I cannot continue to do business with PSA. Why would they grade my card at 10 when they have 5 9s and they're trying to sell? They're damaging our cards, man. Yeah, and that's really the big thing about PSA is they're kind of tough on cards, and I'm not sure if they just have these really big, big men in the back, and that they can't handle the little cards, and they just mess it up. I don't know. I hope they begrudgingly go to TAG because I think they're the best graders in the market. Honestly, they give a full breakdown, including pictures of why a card grades a certain way. You can't beat their transparency. PSA is a complete joke that guarantees a % of gem to bulk. Okay. Well, there's, and maybe this will be the windfall for TAG. Maybe they'll start to really explode now that the monopolies, the PSA monopoly is taking over everything. I have PSA is just trash. Well, you take away people's options to grade, and you're going to get that, that PSA is garbage, PSA is trash. They're not good for anybody but, their own insiders, just like Topps fanatics. All they care about is selling cards over grading cards, This is an anti-competitive merger. The timing, too. Right after PSA gets caught in a grading scandal, they buy a main competitor so no one has anywhere else to go. Yeah, and that's just it. Is everyone's starting to feel trapped, thrown in a little box here. And the fad was an awesome time. We had grading companies that were independent. We just don't have that anymore. We have Nat Turner controlling everything. And we have to view the hobby through his lens for the most part. And his lens tends to favor himself and his own companies over the poor collector. The industry will live on, but the only way we will save the hobby is by simply saying no. Don't buy any new wax. Don't grade anything. So buy slabs. That's it. Nothing else will work. Instead of 10x the hobby, the people must half it. Yeah, that's true. I mean, if you really want to change the hobby, you have to stop buying into it. You have to basically boycott it to an extent. And that's tough, I mean, you got to boycott all the Pokemon TCG graders, that are, showing out, 100 of the same card Pokemon, I mean, I just don't know how you could do it. Nothing could be worse for the hobby than this. Right at the time when Beckett could have really capitalized on the scandal, if they could have gotten out of their own way. Too bad the former SGC CEO couldn't have gotten a chance there. It's now a monopoly of the sleaziest order. Yeah, I mean, and I'm not sure what this little scandal, if anything, has to do with PSA purchasing Beckett. But it would just be nice to have more options out there, I mean, yeah, tag is what it is, but, the tag slabs are not very tough now. Are they? Now, here's one. Keep the monopoly alive. Best crypto domains, yeah. The crypto bros are rooting for the monopoly here. The monopoly is now complete. Shame. First, at SGC Grading Now, Beckett Collect. I will slab grade with whomever is number 4. I was an SGC guy until PSA gobbled them. Always felt Beckett had conflicts. Any suggestions? Hashtag the hobby pals. I wish I had a suggestion. I know a lot of people are pulling, the thing, go to tag, go to CGC. I just don't trust those guys either. That's the problem here is I don't trust PSA. I don't trust tag. I don't trust CGC. What's left for people like us, What am I going to do? Start my own grading company? Maybe that's just it. We all need to start our own grading companies now. Overnight, we have 50 new grading companies, all started by little hobbyists like myself, PSA would just be pulling their hair out. How did this happen? Beckett will disappear in the near future, yes. They likely will, just like SGC, I can already see the skeletons rolling in, just the leftover bones. This will also affect eBay authentication. What if then PSA says old Jordan rookies and BGS we don't recognize? That's cold. But that would be an aggressive market move. The foolery is coming. Just glad I'm secure in my collection. Yeah, and that's another issue is the eBay authentication and how that is being operated. I'm always fearful of eBay's authentication because they don't do it right. They really don't. They farm it out to different companies when they should be doing it themselves. And if they're not going to do it themselves, they should just not do it. Is this a game changer? Maybe PSA used a PPP loan to complete the deal. Yeah, that's funny. And that's directed at it's Jeff Wilson, PPP loan guy. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a big fan of PP loan people either. I never thought those should have gone out. I mean, rich people getting big, massive loans. You have all these people starving in the country, homeless. I just don't agree with that either. We are nearing a breach of federal antitrust laws. Yeah, and nothing is happening. Well, we live under, the rule of Donald Trump, unfortunately. And he loves this idea of corporate monopolization. Clear as day, I mean, He'll favor who he believes should be favored. I mean, the problem is the poor consumer here. I mean, as a consumer, you start asking yourself, you've been boxed in. You don't have any choices. You don't have any opportunities here. What are you going to do? And I'm fearful that you're going to start seeing more and more people leave the hobby. And maybe that's good and bad, because as more and more people leave the hobby, Topps Fanatics and PSA are going to feel it, Yeah, those breakers will prop them up for so long, but eventually you won't have the people buying into breaks, Already people are turning away from sports cards and going more into TCG. This could be a hobby breaker at the end of the day. It won't be a quick hobby breaker. It will be kind of a slow bleed. It will be people trying it out, doing test runs, eventually just saying, you know what, screw this. I'm doing this instead, It is what it is. I mean, I wish I could change it. I wish the government would do what it has to do to step in and stop all this monopolization by PSA. It would definitely be a good thing for consumers, but it's not happening. They can now buy cards, grade them as PSA 10 and Black Label 10, and sell to us while pop controlling. Yeah, that's the problem here. It's total domination of grading. So, we can go on and on. Overall, people are not happy with this acquisition, I know everyone is happy about, getting their stuff graded at PSA and, hopefully getting a PSA 10, but more often than not, it's not happening that way. Well, at least with the little guys, I mean, if you're one of these big fish, a big breaking company, I'm sure they're just rolling in the 10s, I mean, the buddy thing, and that's really the issue with PSA is so many collectors see this buddy thing with PSA, and people that they favor, giving them PSA 10s and other people giving them PSA 9s so they can buy their slabs or whatever and I guess regram the PSA 10s. At least that's the scandal, The pullout's going to be there. It's going to be a test the waters issue. It's not working out. Time to move on. And it's sad because, when I think of this hobby just a few years ago, there was a lot of excitement. There was a lot of beliefs that this was a place for consumers to go to, maybe get a step up, where they never could before. And it was kind of a place for the little guy to kind of, come on in and get something, but clearly the big titans of the market don't like that, They want to own and control everything in this market. Am I rushing to buy products from Topps Fanatics? No, I'm not. Why would I? It's only meant for breakers. Am I rushing to get my products graded at PSA and all of, its Anaconda of other grading companies? No, I am not. I'm too smart for that. And I think a lot of other people are too, And so I know there's talk that even Pokemon's kind of going downhill. I don't see that happening. I know there's a belief that One Piece is going to dominate the market sometime soon. I really don't see that happening either. But overall, with all the increased monopolization in this hobby, I see a decrease in interest, from a lot of people, including myself. I already told you, I spend a lot of my time already, looking at vehicles to resell, getting back into my art business. I'm basically kind of going back to the pre-pandemic to an extent. And, if things work better in this country, if the government would step in when it needs to step in on monopolization, if, this hobby wasn't dominated by breaking companies and, you have to buy into breaks to get the cards you want for sports cards, and the TCG market is a headache with all the scalpers, trying to scalp everything. What I found is, well, there are other markets that you can enter. that do treat you a lot better, if you know what I mean, because in a way, sports cards, the TCG, the grading, the TOS Fanatics monopolization, it feels abusive to an extent to small consumers. It just really does. No matter what you do, you can't win. You're just being controlled by all these big, massive forces of power that have money. And if you want to keep fighting the fight against the blob, that's about what I think of it now. You can keep fighting the blob, but the blob is winning. And the little guy is losing, just like in the old sci-fi movie for the most part, The monopolies are winning and the small little consumer is losing, especially in this hobby, unfortunately. And that's why, I'll say it again, there are other things to do. The fad happened, and to me, there's a lot of reasons why the fad is getting destroyed, Anyway, I'd like to thank my subscribers. You're awesome. You're the reason I keep doing these episodes. I'd like to thank my viewers. You're awesome too. If you could just hit the subscription button, it would help my channel out greatly. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. I'm out of here. Bye.